Education officials are working towards having students be bilingual by the end of primary school and biliterate by the end of secondary school, ensuring that they are capable of reading and writing in the Creole language as they do for the English language. Stakeholders gathered for a presentation of the language education policy and plan, which ultimately seeks to fully integrate the Creole language, Patois, into the school curriculum. The Curriculum and Materials Development Unit, CAMDU, of the Department of Education, Innovation and Vocational Training secured funding from education partner UNESCO to design an implementation plan for the application of the St. Lucia National Language Policy. Secretary General for the St. Lucia National Commission for UNESCO, Marcia Symphorian, says that the organization is committed to promoting languages and multilingualism in the education system as it can advance inclusion, foster social cohesion, and contributes to sustainable development, goal number 4, leaving no one
So,
behind.
I just wanted to ask about, like, for example, Saint Lucia is obviously working towards official language status, but how did it come about in Haiti? What was the motivation? What was there a significant incident that happened? What happened for it to get its official status in Haiti?
There were journalists that were extremely courageous. Dominique, who actually was eventually killed. He was one of the leaders of Radio Haiti Inter. So Radio Haiti, in fact, now the archives are online. Radio Haiti was one of the first radios to basically give the news in Creoles. That way, everyone could understand what the news were about. So that created a movement where people understood very deeply that there could not be freedom in Haiti, there could not be democracy in Haiti without the use of Creole in all sectors of society. In '87, after Duvalier was toppled, then for the writing of the Constitution that was published in 1987, there was a clear sense that the Constitution had to make Creole the national language and the official language as well. In fact, this was the first time that the Constitution was published in Haiti in both French and Creole in 1987. You see, and that this is where we find this Article 5 that says that Creole is national and then is one of the two co-official languages. And then there was an Article 40 that asked the state that all documents being published in Haiti having to do with the nation, it needs the document has to be published in both Creole and French, so that the people can understand the laws, the decrees that they're being ruled by. They that to be. And then there were other articles saying that if you're going to arrest someone, your mandate have to be in Creole so that that person understand why they're being arrested. If you're going to arrest them, they should know why. And if you write it in French, they won't know why. So you have to write it in Creole. And in that same constitution, Article 213 asked for the creation of a Haitian Creole Academy in order to promote Haitian Creole. So that '87 constitution is really remarkable. But again, I mentioned this seesaw movement, this like pendulum movement, you one step forward, two steps backward. That constitution in '87, which made Creole official, which asked that all documents be written in the two official languages. In 2012, when it was amended, that same constitution that made Creole official, the amendments were published, guess what? In French only.
Creole is not a language that is taught in schools. A whole lot of the children attended schools. Creole is their first language because their parents, their grandparents whom they are brought up with do not know English properly. So they go into schools and their first language is Creole. English is foreign to them. So why not teach Creole in schools? But the Creole must be taught by people who knows it properly. Creole have its adjective. It have its parts of speech. Present, past, and so forth. but you have to know it to teach it.
The National Language Policy is a document which looks at the role of Creole in education, specifically at the primary and secondary levels, ensuring that students at those levels are competent in reading, writing, and speaking the Creole language, much in the same way they do standard English. The Ministry of Education, Sustainable Development, Innovation, Science, Technology and Vocational Training recently held a National Language Policy Implementation Planning Conference for the Curriculum and Materials Development Unit, CAMDU. The online forum, which brought together professionals from across the Caribbean region, sought to get an idea of best practices and the considerations for putting an implementation plan together to ensure that Creole gets the recognition it deserves. Based on research, officials are expecting that students' literacy levels will improve since they will be able to transfer the skills developed in their home language to other languages that they will learn.
It also means that we must have teacher professional development and teacher certification and training so that they can bring across or use the appropriate methodologies and present the language in a way that students will be able to understand all of the content area subjects.
So what do you think about the recent decision of St. Lucia to actually implement it in schools and make it the journey for it to become an official language in St. Lucia?
I think this is that the decision by the St. Lucians to include Creole in the curricula. So over there they call it Kwéyòl. So in Haiti we call it Creole, and in St. Lucia and Dominica they call it Kwéyòl. I think it's wonderful because what it does, it validates the heritage, the culture of the children. You see, because those children, many of them have families, ancestors who speak the language, and because of this tragic hegemonic history, often the language is despised, is put aside as if it's inferior. And there is no better recipe to condemn the community to failure by excluding, by devalorizing the ancestral, the communal language. You see, because if the kids come to school and the school tells them from day one that their identity, their language, their culture have no room, have no place in the classroom, basically it makes the child feel dejected. So the sense of belonging is so important, actually both for children and for adults. I myself, as an adult teaching at MIT, whenever I have a feeling that my ideas, my identity, my culture do not matter, it affects my day at work. It affects my performance as a teacher, as a professor. Imagine a child now. Imagine a child who's being told that the language, what they hear the grandmother, the mother, the children, the friends use on a daily basis, that language has no place in the classroom. It tells them that they themselves, their identities, don't have a place in the classroom, and it's a recipe for failure. The children, like in the case of Haiti, they come to school, they already know the Creole language. That's what they've been hearing since they were in the womb. So we know from linguistics that children start learning the native language, the mother tongues, that's why it's called the mother tongue. They start learning it in the mother's womb, you see? So they come to they come to this world with the brain already wired by the mother's language. That's what they hear in the womb. So it's an amazing wealth in terms of the capacity to learn that they bring with them. And for the first 4, 5, 6 years of their lives, they build an entire imagination, an entire conceptual system, an entire architecture of the world, an entire worldview in that native language. And then they come to school with that wealth, and the school tells them, this wealth doesn't belong here. We're going to replace it with something that comes from another language that you don't even speak.
But our education system is not fair. It's really not fair. Why does CXC have new programs in Mandarin coming out? I think Dutch might happen one day. Portuguese just happened, and we can understand why, because Brazil is CARICOM's biggest neighbor. Guyana is part of CARICOM, and the headquarters are there. Suriname is part of CARICOM. And those two countries alone, Brazil is a massive border. So Portuguese is important. But why do we constantly negate our own self-importance? You have to love your neighbors, you love yourself. And unless we love ourselves linguistically, this love that we claim to have for all these other people out there in their languages is absolutely false love. You have to love yourself first. You have to understand yourself first. And education has to be in the language that children are happy and comfortable in. Who wants education to be a negative, horrible experience? Education has to be something that children look forward to, that they want to, whether we call it school or whatever. I'm not an educator in that sense of all these different theories of how you educate and whatever, but the language of instruction is completely crucial, because if you want successful education, there are a number of things that have to be put in place, but to me, the number one thing is the language of instruction. If you constantly denigrate and despise and look down on people's languages, they're not going to feel comfortable. They'll shut up in class. Maybe the bigger, badder, more aggressive ones might get through, but and so many studies have done this. To me, it's a waste of time saying, "Oh, let's go and do another academic study on it." There's proof around the world that when you treat somebody well, their psyche and their identity are lifted up, and if you can treat somebody well, just simply by accepting and embracing who they are, and who they are must include their language.
Does Creole have the status it deserves?
Well, again, these are loaded questions. Does it have the status it deserves? Who is to determine what status it deserves? You know what I'm saying? For me, it doesn't, but for the next person, it might. Probably it has more than the status that it deserves to some people, But I would like to see the Creole elevated to the status of an official language in St. Lucia. At present, it isn't. It is normally referred to as the national language. Now, what that means, I have no idea. Nobody has been kind enough to explain that to me. But when you read the literature, when you read things around, when you speak to people, they speak about the national language as opposed to the official language. I would like to see it elevated to the status of official language, and hopefully someday, it will in fact receive that kind of official status. But to the extent that really and truly it is a language that is used in every situation in St. Lucia, in a sense, then I don't know if affording it the status of official language will change anything. Because even now, for example, it is a language that is used frequently in the parliament, for example. It's used. The only thing is that in the parliament, there's a strange situation there, really and truly, because you are permitted to use the language in the parliament to explain things, to expound on things, but you are not allowed to use it to make a point. The point must be in English, and after having made the point in English, then you could explain in the Creole, because the Hansard does not record the Creole. So, 20 years from now, if you're going through Hansard, there's no record of the contribution made in Creole. So I mean that in itself is a travesty in a sense, and that's one of the reasons I would like to see it elevated to the status of official language. Because if it's an official language, then it would have that status whereby they would have to represent it in the Hansard.
The new language policy, what do you think of it? Or how important is it?
I think it's very important. And what I've seen so far, they are trying to pull on what has already been in place in Martinique and Guadeloupe for a number of years, what has been used in Jamaica and in Haiti. So it is a mammoth task. They need way more funding than they have. A question that I would have liked to find out, because they want subjects to be taught in French Creole, not now, obviously, but in terms of training for teachers. When will that take place? Will it be some of it happening simultaneously? But what and this is what I would have said in the presentation that you would have missed, is that as a historian, I look at the long view. And we are a very young nation, less than 50 years old. And sometimes you want things to happen because we live in an age where everything is immediate. But a language policy, we will not see the results, like any solid result 50 years from now. The British, it took the British, we are 100 years post 1880, 1890, where they were trying to make English not just the official language on paper, but in reality. Today, it is the official language in reality, but it took a while. And so I am really, really happy to see what they are doing, how they are pushing it, but I just want them to not be discouraged when they don't see, or they get a lot of pushback, that they will need to go ahead. But I think it's a step in the right direction. Some people might say it's a pie in the sky, but we've had the examples in Martinique and Guadeloupe, and therefore it doesn't mean that it's impossible. But we had our own example in the past, and we have more tools. We have more, what's the word I want to look? More in terms of teaching practice, in terms of language learning. Our understanding is so much greater. And so I think all of that is going into what they are doing. And
it's been many, many years in the making. And there are many people to thank behind that, you know, maybe Dame Paulette Louisi, and so many more people. I just can't think of them right now. Who have been trying to push Creole in schools. And finally, this year, there was an education conference on it. And it's very exciting. It's very new. There are lots of questions being asked around it about, you know, how would we teach this, what that would look like, etc. And so it's a pivotal point, I think, in history, in our history. And you know, we're super excited to be able to collaborate with different institutions and schools and be able to like push that forward.
I think the people who I see who are on board, they have done their homework to pull in the people who can assist. And what they really need to do now is to really hit the wood on the ground, to explain to parents who are thinking that their children are going to university, that's what they have in mind for them, and where is the place of Creole in that kind of life, to really get into the communities and deliver those messages. And I think if they can get buy-in in the community, among the parents, the grandparents, make grandparents proud to be teaching their children Creole. That, I mean, because the same way where I pointed out that the children in the 1890s, when they went home, they heard no English. You can't be teaching the French Creole in the school and not have the support outside of the school to promote the language. And so they need to bring in the grandparents and the parents into that. But I don't know if I've heard enough about that, but I've only heard two. I was there for one seminar and some other meeting that they had. And I don't think I really heard too much on that, but it's probably not because that is not part of their mandate.
In a landmark development for St. Lucia's educational landscape, students will soon receive formal instruction in the island's traditional language when Kwéyòl instruction commences at the start of the new academic year. Executed under the St. Lucian Kwéyòl Curriculum Pilot Program, in September, teaching will commence at 14 primary schools and one private institution, with grades K, 1, and 3 receiving 2 30-minute lessons per week.
3 years to have Creole being considered entering the schools. They've been using the Creole to reach the children, to explain to the children. So the Creole has been in the schools there with the teachers for a long time, but it's never been in a formal way. So now we stop going through the back door. We are coming in now with Creole into the schools through the front door. Creole qui est commissionné actuellement.
Le créole, c'est notre langue maternelle. On a toujours parlé le créole, mais on ne lisait pas et on n'écrivait pas le créole. Maintenant, c'est devenu quelque chose qu'on recherche en fait. Tandis qu'on était gamin, on obligeait, on imposait aux enfants d'avoir la culture française, de parler français couramment, convenablement. Mais maintenant, si un enfant parle le créole, je pense que on va plutôt l'aider à acquérir cette notion-là que de vouloir lui dire non, 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 tu n'as pas le droit.
There's a situation where some of the radio stations are moving away from having dedicated Creole programs to a situation where right now, increasingly, you have programs where the announcers, speak the way people speak on the road. They switch from one to the next, and I think that is a development. Some people say as well, no, how could it be a development? They are using both of them. I say it's a development because that's how you speak every day, So in the case where you have a dedicated Creole program, there are some people who will not be listening, period, because they have no interest in the language. With those other programs, they are listening. And when the announcer switches to Creole, they have no choice because they're already listening. And before they could switch back, before they could go and change the station, the announcer is back in English already anyhow, So I think that's a positive thing that has happened in radio in St. Lucia. But certainly kudos to RCI. They've done a very good job in terms of actually introducing Creole to the radio listenership in St. Lucia, and they continue to do so up to now.
So there's this radio presenter called Dubois in St. Lucia, and he's like early in the morning, around their time, around 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the morning, he will say all the news, all the stations, everything in Patois, yeah? And I think around that time, for me, that's around 10, 11. So sometimes there's Caribbean Hot FM, and I will switch on to that, and I will hear all the Patois, him kind of saying everything in Patois. And again, that reminds me of it helps me to understand and remind me of Patois as well. So that's really helpful.
18th of August 1974 was when St. Lucians first heard Creole spoken on radio, and that was Radio Caribbean. This Creole program, which was then called Radio Asesano, meaning that the radio is ours, came about after the elections of 1974. I used to be a spokesperson on a political platform which was the St. Lucia Labour Party. And my delivery of the Creole language caused Earl Huntley to organize with management of Radio Caribbean to allow him to present a Creole program. And all the time I was the target and I did not know. Even now it is still the most popular radio program at any given time, up till now.
But why do you think that is?
Because the people are hearing the language that they understand. Because remember, in the olden days, English was and still is a foreign language. Okay? And even those who speak the English language do not understand the English language properly. But speak to them in the Creole language, they will understand you better. It has opened up broadcasting, because even in Dominica, when I started in 1974, it was as a result of the popularity of the program Radio Asesanu in Dominica that they started theirs. And I made Dominica's music popular. Exile One, Gramax, and them and whatnot, Liquid Eyes, because it was as a result of the Creole program, realizing that it was so popular in Dominica that they started their own, Dominica Broadcasting Service with Ferdinand Frampton, who is now deceased, and a whole other set of others. And even in St. Lucia, that caused them, other radio stations, to have a Creole broadcast.
But in terms of the radio, I know that there's definitely, I think it's 1 hour a week, and I remember you mentioned in the classes, where you can listen to a whole radio show in Kwéyòl, and people call in Kwéyòl as well, and you can hear even in Dominica.
That is DBS. That's DBS. It's 2 hours.
Is it 2 hours?
It's 2 hours, yes.
Ça qu'a fait, bonjour, bon après-midi tout le monde, bienvenue, ça qu'a fait, comment soyez? C'est temps pour nous mener une autre expérience créole à Radio DBS. Bon après-midi tout le monde, moi c'est Guyana, Fontaine Wilson, c'est une autre opportunité pour nous mener une autre expérience, avec expérience là, comme vous savez, c'est en créole. Bon, comment ça y est? Est-ce tout bagay? Catherine, ou ka toujours fait mon oui là ou dit bonjour Kikine? Bienvenue tout le monde. C'est en l'autre journée, c'est mercredi, le 6e jour à mois mars. Eh ben, si men la capotin, ma savent si c'est moi ou ben si c'est les autres monde qui ka ouais ça, mais wadi si men la capotin.
Experience Creole started in 1977. At the time on DBS radio. At the time, the manager during that period, if I'm to be exactly sure, is Mr. Dennis Joseph. At the time, he saw the need to include Creole in DBS's programming. And I think the show started with a man called Ferdinand Frampton. Commission. I'm not too sure if you will. And after Ferdinand Frampton, I think Felix Henderson took up the mantle as host of Experience Creole, and the rest is history. It just bloomed and blossomed, and it went places. It really took Creole to where many of us hoped to see Creole today, and it gave Creole that platform that it is today. I mean, it started off as a platform or an avenue for Dominicans who don't speak English, Dominicans who can't understand English. So the news would be translated to Creole, the English news, and there would be discussions and topics on various interests of the audience. And I think it grew from there, it grew to much more. But that's where it started in 1977. During the management period of Mr. Dennis Joseph. I started hosting Experience Creole in the year 2000. And interestingly, I wasn't meant to start working on DBS radio as a Creole host. I always say it happened by accident. I began working at DBS radio. As a matter of fact, I got an opportunity to be an attached student to DBS Radio in 1999. While there was an opening for Creole host, Creole announcer. At the time, the young lady who was the host resigned, and they asked me, would you, knowing I'm from Grand Bay, and you're from Grand Bay, would you be able to be the host of Experience Creole? And I'm like, no, I can't speak conversational Creole. And I couldn't speak conversational Creole at the time. I understood Creole, but was unable to converse in Creole, interestingly. But when I started, all I could say was the time and my name. And then, increasingly, I got better at it. And here I am today. But that's the thing. I always tell people that understanding Creole doesn't it doesn't mean that you can converse in Creole. You understand it, yes. But as to conversing or producing content in Creole on radio, it's a different thing altogether. So I learned on the job. And that is how, and that is why I began as a Creole host of Experience Creole. No, being immersed in Creole as a person from Grand Bay, it made it easier. But at the time, I was not able to converse in Creole, just understanding it. For a very long time, Experience Creole has been an avenue to discuss local news. We discuss regional news. We discuss international news. We also devote a segment of Experience Creole to education. So we teach as well. While we are not teachers, but we use publications by those who know Creole better than us as hosts to teach to the public. So we use, our Creole dictionaries, we have our Creole proverbs, and we also invite experts in Creole language to come on to speak to us on various topics of interest. So we explore diverse topics on Experience Creole. Everything is spoken about on Experience Creole. Anything you can think of that would be of importance in terms of educating our public, entertainment as well. That is a huge staple, especially as a host. I make sure that we entertain as well as educate and inform the public in Creole. Experience Creole is a staple in DBS's programming. It's a staple in Dominica. It's a staple all over the world. I know people from all over the world who listen to Experience Creole to this day, in 2024. Experience Creole started to give Creole that voice and to help promote that Creole culture, help preserve the Creole language. Because some of us think it's dying. But I believe because of Experience Creole, it hasn't died. Experience Creole is one of the reasons why the Creole language in Dominica is where it is today. There are many other people who work hard, like qu'elle, Comité Creole, the Cultural Division, and other groups who persevere in the quest to keep Creole thriving and alive in Dominica. Experience Creole is very important. For close to more than 50 years, it's been existing. And people learn Creole just by listening to Experience Creole. They get to appreciate the culture, the Creole culture, the language. I met someone some time ago and she said to me that we have Creole content on DBS Radio has grown to not just news and conversations, but in terms of making Creole relatable. And that is what my goal is. Too often we see the Creole was taboo. It wasn't spoken by many folks in Dominica. But Experience Creole, that's one of its mission, and that is to have the entire population embrace Creole. And even if it's not a situation where everybody will speak Creole, but in terms of appreciation, in terms of understanding why we need to preserve Creole, and understanding why it's important to keep this part of our identity alive. So Experience Creole is very important, and I don't see it being absent in Dominica anytime soon. So.
Okay.
I know there are some Lucian plays called Zafemun. Yeah, they're on YouTube.
Yeah, that's quite funny.
Yeah, but I don't think there's anything going on in Dominica on that score.
A very big mouth. If there's someone in your car, la même mission ou en toi car, lankaka, and they make it nice.
Check Campeche has been very important, I think, in terms of language development and language appreciation. Because what they've done is that they've actually brought the language into your living room, on the television, among people and so on. So that everybody in St. Lucia, practically everybody, knows Chekapesh and would be able to give you a little line from Chekapesh or something of that nature. And in fact, the major players in Chekapesh, Cooks and Iglesia, have become household names. And they had been used in advertisements, for example, where you're trying to influence people, you know, and that sort of stuff. So both from the standpoint of the Creole as a language and the Creole culture in itself, because Chekapesh, they don't just carry the language, because in their presentations and so on, they use both English and Creole. But it is the Creole culture that really propels them forward and make them popular.
I believe that having news and just any kind of publication on a whole in Haitian Creole, it's not just about representing the people, but also accessibility. Not everybody in Haiti speaks French, even though it's an official language. It is literally the language of the everyday people. And so you'll meet people that Haitian Creole is what they mostly speak. And I don't think that they should lose out on important information or feel lesser than for not learning the language of, I'll just say it politely, they're colonizers. So if we're going to talk about respecting people's, you know, culture, making them feel represented, when we talk about diversity, inclusion, all of this is a part of diversity and inclusion. So we have talented people out there who can do these things, who can use their language to bring messages to people in these different mediums. So we should just allow those platforms for them to do so.
And actually, there's an initiative a few years back, I think that was 10 years back, when they started putting subtitles in some news, I think in the news. Yeah. And they were putting translations and the street names, street posts, so that people would not lose Creole. And that was cool.
Oh yeah, in Guadeloupe, yeah, to do that. The name of the streets or the places are in streets. In Guadeloupe, to be honest, you can have the news in Creole.
Yeah.
There's a news that's just plainly in Creole.
In channels.
And sometimes when they go, you know, asking questions in the street, people just talk in Creole. Yeah. So I think it depends where you are, because obviously if you're in the UK or if you're in France, they wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
But in the Caribbean, they make the effort.
Yeah, I think it's funny that you say that. Like when the interviewers go in the street with their mics, people just, sometimes they get asked a question in French, they just switch because they assume that the person in front of them is bilingual as well. So that's really cool because, we all speak it, we all understand it.
But in terms of news broadcasts, I think a lot of it happened because the COVID news had to be disseminated to everyone in the population. Children won't come into school, so you couldn't depend on the children to go back home to tell their parents. Even though they were doing it on online classroom, but initially the online classroom thing took a while to really get to get up and going. So, like many things, COVID has accelerated a lot of things people were attempting to do, but found it maybe expensive or didn't have the time, or the platforms were not as accessible, or they didn't have the skills. But I think the period allowed them to hone and take time to develop those skills and push out. But news programs specifically on radio and television, I think the government had to do that.
It's one of the tools that can be used, but I think with French, Caribbean, Creole, there are other tools that already exist that have been helping. The fact that it's used, even if the visual element is absent, the fact that it's used, I think, is enough, and that's what has been making Creole progress the way it has. It's become accepted. It's the norm. It's on the radio. It's on the television. So although there may be that lack of visual tools for the populace, you do have it with the materials that are created, the pedagogical materials that exist to teach it.
And you have advertisements. You have a lot of advertisements. When you go to Fort-de-France in Martinique, you see things I think one day would have happened. And the way they write Noel, N-W-E-L, and to me they're pretty. There are many visual aid material and so forth. And again, how we apply for teaching, all of that, the training, the course of the material as well play a part in the, if you want to teach your language, if you want to use it as a means, as a medium to teach French, and so forth.
Jodi a mwen yon ti kado bay zot. Me, zoni pou travaye ti miet pou kado sa. Me kay bay zot yon mot en anglais, ekle me fè sa, ou ni pou di me mot en patois. Après ça, on y pour parler ba moi pour discarder à patois tout seul. Si vous savez un petit morceau anglais, ou fini. Mais si vous faites, ça c'est ça ou une bouteille de vin. So, vous voulez, vin dis-moi ça ou ça fait. On est discardé à présent. Allez.
Okay.
Ah, you finish? Okay.
Papillon.
À présent, on est discardé. Allez.
Papillon, c'est d'autres petites bêtes. D'autres bêtes qui ont volé tout partout. Ils ont un pied bois ici, tout pied fleur. Ils ont volé, ils ont un caillou tout. Ils ont toutes différentes couleurs. Ils ont jaune, ils ont noir. Ils ont toutes différentes couleurs. La nion qui noir.
You win.
Okay, merci.
You win. Butterfly.
Not pigeon. Pigeon is bird. Butterfly. Better fe.
I'm sorry.
I mean, that's certainly true for Creole. You don't see television programs in Creole. I don't think Dominica has television programs in Creole either. Of course, you have radio adverts in Creole done by Felix Henderson. You heard those?
Yeah.
And half English, half Creole.
They're brilliant.
They're good. So you have those, and then you also have the weekday program called Experience Creole. I can't think of anything else that's on offer.
We have got some aspects of Creole within the TV now, but these are relatively recent developments. On the newspapers, again, I mean, I remember The Voice of St. Lucia published one of my poems in Creole. So it's really not the media per se, it's the belief system. It's if you believe that your culture is important and deserves, the widest treatment possible, your media would be impacting on that assumption. It would be looking at Creole in the society. It could be looking at Creole and old age. It could be looking at Creole at the primary stages. It could be looking at Creole and money. It could be doing all sorts of things. The Creole is there, the social issues are there, but the idea, the ideology that you could use a black mind in relation to a black issue is our problem. Our central assumption is unless it is done within the European cloak, it's not really done at all. It's not viewed as serious.
The simple fact of getting it established as a normal language, like a lot of people still don't want to speak Creole because they think it's rude, or you still have people who, there's a stigma attached to this language that needs to change before we get to get a show in Creole. For instance, there was the on Creole Day, because there's one Creole Day in Martinique, and on Creole Day you can't hear Creole. They're just talking about Creole Day, and they don't speak Creole. They don't do the news in Creole. They will just do the news in Creole and put subtitles. No, it's in French, it's ridiculous. So you have a Creole Day and you don't speak Creole, and you want people to take you seriously. I think that it is defeating the purpose.
To both of you, how important is the development of media in Creole to you? How essential do you think that is?
It's very important. I think it would help for immersion purposes, really, because you can learn Creole, but if you're not hearing it around you, you can forget. And if other people are not speaking it, you probably won't speak it. So it would be good, yes, if you just turn on BBC One and heard the news in Creole or Channel 4.
I do think that there needs to be more content in media in Creole. There is a need, and I have observed that with the inclusion of content on TikTok, and more or less on TikTok, I've observed quite a bit of content creators creating content in Creole. And I was very, very happy to see that. And even all Dominicans, they create that space to speak Creole. And in terms of film, I believe that a lot of work needs to be done to take Creole into that space as well, in order that we continue preserving it, for future generations. If we don't do that, then it's going to get lost. I don't think Experience Creole alone can do it. While we continue making sure that Experience Creole preserves and promotes Creole language and so on. But there is still a very large percentage of the population who doesn't speak Creole, and that includes the younger generation. So when I see younger folks like I do, and even younger, take Creole to TikTok, take Creole to Instagram, I smile, But I think there's a lot more which needs to be done in terms of a structured platform for Creole, not just going out there and speaking it willy-nilly, but a structured platform for Creole needs to be looked into throughout the Caribbean.
Moi changer ou sav? Ou te vin ici à longtemps pour jazz festival là? Ou te vin sou ek te café à chay cochonné en place là? C'est ou même?
Garçon, sorti devant moi, avant au fond moi pas cher.
Fait que moi changer ou, moi te di ou, quitter cesse moi bat misère, vieux trini salope, en chou.
Non moi c'est na une chance à tête tout boy. Just dis moi que c'est oye exote ya fi jan moi.
Ou quoi moi c'est un beau couillon ou ça fait ça ouvre et puis moi. Na fizi we chou ba ou sav trini. Na coupe kou ba ou sav.
Garçon, ou pas connaître que moun waye? Moi c'est Narain vie sorti salope. Moi c'est Met Trinidad ou sav.
Narain? Narain ça c'est vraiment où? Mais pas ça kwezi moi. Tellement temps a passé. Papa moi on Francis. Ou a sav comment y pour moi. Mais macho tellement. Moi ni a belle surprise ba ou.
Et tout wed?
It was like a challenge, because when CASAF started, first the language was taught the people in France, talking about France, in Martinique and Guadeloupe there was no problem, but the thing for us, we needed to do a music that would look like us. So when we talked about it, we said that we have to sing it in Creole because Creole is our culture, okay? All the things that our parents were singing for us when we were young, all the stories that they were saying, there was Creole into it. So we have to put Creole, and make and spread our music with that language at the same time. So at home it was easy because they were used to have, the casual music, in Creole. But going to France, it was different, and we didn't want to stay only in the Caribbean group, we wanted to explode. So we went to see, some major company, and they didn't want us because for them we were too roots. See, you see what I mean? So it was not what not like English, like French, like So we said, okay, the world is big. So we went out. We went to Africa because Africa started calling Kassav. So we went there, and people were singing in Creole the way they could, because they didn't know the language, but they liked it. And if they wanted, they would change the words, to that would sound the same, but with something who meant something to them. You see what I mean? It was really funny, at the time, when they were telling us entrance. And we spoke Creole, but so many people got into the music that finally in France, they said, well, I guess that we're going to miss something if we don't go there. So then they start calling us, and they signed us at that. After Africa adopted us, France adopted us. And French people got into Zouk Kassav. But the problem is us. It's always us. If we want to do something, if we believe in the thing, we can succeed. Kassav is a good example with that. We decided to create a music with what we had, with the music of Guadeloupe, starting with Guadeloupe. And we went all over the world, and with the Creole, okay? But the people in Martinique and so on, they always believe, not all of them, but most of them believe that if you want to be successful, France has to adopt you. And so they started to do things like people used to do before. They started again singing in French. And singing in French doesn't give them the essence of who they are. You see? The thing is, when you listen to the words and everything, some of them would talk about winter and summer, and we don't have winter and summer in the Caribbean. You see what I mean? We don't have, the blue of your eyes and stuff like that, you see what I mean? So it's just ridiculous, it gets, and we have to teach the people that when a language disappears, it's a culture that disappears. So we need to keep the language that goes with the culture that we have in.
Well, prior to Zouk, you had compas music from Haiti, and when the Haitians used to come and tour every year in Guadeloupe and Martinique, they brought compas over because Zouk is a blend of compas, of calypso from Dominica, and other genres like Biguine, Belay, and so forth. But I think with the 70s Creole movement, the Jirek, and also then in the mid-80s, you had the first advertisement in French Creole, and some of the artists were taken, to play a part in one of them. So I think Zouk especially would have certainly give Creole a different flavor to a certain extent.
Actually, as a child, listening to songs by Kassav and Malavoie, and what it did for me, it helped my own linguistic consciousness, because I realized how similar the Creole of Martinique was to the Creole of Haiti. But at the same time, I started noticing interesting differences. Like there's a beautiful song, I think it's Malavoie, Carré c'est moins, Soleil la caleve. So I was always puzzled by this notion of Soleil la caleve. So they say, caleve. So because in Haitian Creole, caleve means the soleil is able to rise. And I always thought, but why is the song saying that the sun is able to rise? Of course the sun is able to rise. But actually, in Martinique Creole, Soleil la caleve doesn't mean it's able to rise, it means the sun is rising. You see, so to me, that was a beautiful introduction to comparative linguistics, to how you have two languages that are very similar, but yet certain words that sound the same have different syntactic properties.
Brought the French Creole community, artist community together, because with Cadence Lipso, the Gramax, the late Jeff Joseph from Gramax, he was based in Guadeloupe. I think he spent his time in Guadeloupe most of the time. They went to France. It was the same thing with Exile One, but Jeff actually used to perform with the former founder of CASAV, and it was Volte-Face, and so it brought the artists together. And then you had a French Creole festival in Dominica that happens every year.
Music is very much part of culture. And as I was mentioning before, language, music are very much intertwined in what we call culture, which also dictates what our identity is, like looking at what our identity is. So I think like with music, for example, most Haitian Creole, most music in the Haitian culture is in Creole. And there's a reason for that. Creole is our language, and it's the language of the people. And I find that in music, you find a lot of the language being retained, depending on when the music was created. But there's also the shift. You see the evolution of the language too in music. Like you'll hear new words come about, words that you might not have known, that people in certain pockets of areas, for example, many languages have dialects within the language, and Haitian Creole is no exception of that, right? And so we'll see words, come about in some of the music, and so suddenly it becomes, widely used. And so I feel that music definitely is, not that I would say it informs language, but you hear it. It's a reflection, almost like a mirror in some ways.
I always tell people there's a vibe when you listen to someone speaking Creole. There's actually, as Darnell used the word melody, there's a melody to Haitian Creole. And I think in spiritual spaces, in Haitian spiritual spaces, especially in Vodou, you'll see that music is a really important mechanism for connecting with the language, especially in terms of remembering the history of the language, remembering some of the origins of the language. So yeah, you can't deny the impact that music has on the development of Haitian Creole, and then also vice versa. I think that they both inform one another, and they're both a reflection of the other. But yeah, I don't know, Haitian music, I feel like, Daryl, that has to be like a whole other conversation, because you can ask us this general question about Haitian music, because one of my favorite things to talk about is Haitian music. And most people think about compa, but you have like Racine, you have Rabodai, you have Racine, Troubadou, Rara, Merengue. There's so many different types of Haitian music. So when people talk about Haitian music, globally, I feel like we've not entered the global market in terms of commercial music. But if you're really diving into good quality Haitian music, there's too many to count.
I know for many people who are learning the language, listening to music is also helpful. And it slows down, especially in chorus and in listening to music, it slows down part of, the lyrics. You get to hear the words differently, and you get to retain it better, depending on, how you learn, because we know that melodies are, sometimes you may not remember something, but the melody you remember, and suddenly the words come to you. So I feel that music in that way acts as, an aid to language learning, but it's also cultural, which is what the language is too.
We are taking on. Yes.
The next 5 years, everyone just stopped speaking Creole. What would Lucian music be like?
I believe that Lucian music will just be, I think if it were that way, then we'll more or less lose our identity, if you ask me, because I think that's the key thing. I mean, in Barbados, you have the what do you call it? The Bashment Soca. I mean, Jamaica is dancehall for sure. In Trinidad, despite the soca, you still have the chutney. In Grenada, you have that jab. You know, so I believe that if we were to resort to just English alone, I think we would lose a lot of identity. I'm not saying that you don't have general segment songs that are not straight English, because general segment is not just Patois, speaking Patois and English. You also have other elements like the beat itself, the bass line, the rhythm. So I think if we lose that component, you know, we would lose a great deal. How should I put it? Like your soul, more or less, you know. And I guess it would just be normal soca. It wouldn't be our identity. It would probably, you know, related to Trinidad or related to some international kind of thing. And at the same time too, I think it will probably affect the recognition and the level of demand for our artists as well, because we just come like some sort of a copycat, more or less. So, you know, that's what I believe that would happen if we were to take out Creole. We would more or less take out some of the elements in our identity, and, you know, I encourage persons to, you know, not to resort to that.
I really respect the Mighty Sparrow because, do you know what? I always thought that he was Dominican because all his songs the majority of his songs was in Creole, but then later as I grew older, I realized he was actually from Grenada. So then that's when I kind of realized they spoke Creole in Grenada at some point. I didn't even know that before. So I really admire him because he was doing it, you know, way back. That's the first kind of Creole music I was exposed to. So,
well, he's Grenadian, or at least born Grenadian, grew up in Trinidad, but he sings a couple of songs in Creole. The last time in an interview, I was saying, boy, sometimes you even too short, he's saying. But the fact that he has those songs, it means a lot to Creole speaking people, you know, and they're able to identify with it, and they're able to say, Sparrow, song in Creole, and they like that and so on, and it you know, if something is pleasing to you, then you tend to embrace it, you know, a lot easier than if it is some foreign sounding something, you know. Yeah.
I think he made again a very significant contribution to Creole through Calypso. My own view of Sparrow is that he is a brilliant artist. He is a master of wit, wordplay, repartee. And his early songs were sung either wholly or partly in Creole. You have a song like Gadezina. You have a song like Qu'elle, you have Leve Mako, and there are others. But so he sang a number of songs in Creole, and again, that whole, as I said, the word play, the double entendre, that Sparrow is so good at. You see it in those early calypsos. I have the lyrics of Gadezina in my book. And you know, I really was fascinated when I sat down and looked at those lyrics. I mean, it's fascinating to look at that and to see really how talented Sparrow is. You know, so I think he made a tremendous contribution. The other big one I forgot was Sasai. I mean, every Grenadian remembers Sasai.
She consented, but when we began, if you hear how this man began, boy, Sasai, Sasai, bon Dieu, monsieur, ou ka choué moins. Levez, 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 ouvrez la porte, la garçon, mon ka aller. Sasai, Sasai, bon Dieu, Sparrow, ou ka choué moins.
The history tells us that when Calypso started, it was all in Patois. But in our lifetime, the one who stands out is Slinger Francisco, the Mighty Sparrow. Now let me say that Slinger Francisco comes from 4 miles up the road here, from the village of Grand Roy. And a lot of the elder people here went to school with his mother. So this, where we speak from, is basically Sparrow's origin, just 4 miles away. 4 miles north of here on the western main road. Now, in our lifetime, he was the only one that was singing in Patois. Now, Sparrow can be a controversial figure in whatever he does and whatever he sings, I should say. And there are different views as to what he did for the language. There are some people who would, because a lot of his calypsos had a kind of a raunchy base, you would find that it was not approved by a segment of the population. So it didn't matter whether it was in English or in Patois, and remember he sang in both, they would not approve. For those who approve of the language, it gives us something to reach to. And it has actually documented the language in song. Yes, it's still raunchy because, you know, in my own research, I tried to find calypsos sung by him for the people who are learning the language. And some of them, I think, they're a little bit offended by the content, but I point to the language, you know. So he has done something, and it is controversial what it is he has done. But from the point of view of the language, he has documented the language in calypso.
Was Sparrow ever popular in Martinique?
Oh yeah. I knew Sparrow when I was maybe 6 years old. You know, calypso was hot in Martinique. Yeah, calypso was part of my life, as well as beginning mazurka. You know, it was, you know, in our education and we were traveling a lot. And my parents, we used to go on holidays in Barbados. So we were listening to Merryman and all those singers. And you know, Sparrow was big at home. You know, you didn't have any party without Sparrow, a moment for Sparrow. It was very hot in Martinique when I was a kid.
Because they are around, have been around for some time, and they are still going.
Yeah.
Most of the groups I grew up with in the Caribbean, we don't hear about them anymore, so we listen to them historically, whereas I think with Kassav in particular, it's up to date, it's present, it's now, and it's going forward.
In the case of Kassav, it's not so much the language, but the culture, the rhythm, that underlying rhythm in the music and so on, is a rhythm of the people of the Caribbean, you know? And whenever you have a situation where the musicians use that bass, it becomes popular.
The people that were raised in Paris, born in Paris, were the second generation, we would call them. They were mostly kids of parents that came in the 50s and 60s for what they call the bumidum. Have you heard about that, the bumidum? They were supposed to learn, you know, a job, you know, to do a job, but they didn't learn anything. They put them, you know, in the lower thing, you know.
Regarde ce que j'ai trouvé. Je vais lire quelques passages. Ça, c'est un bulletin qui s'adresse aux coloniaux, comme ils disent ça, des établissements Henri Cisco. Donc, 1963. Tu te rends compte? Alors, pour les gens, les Français de France, les coloniaux, qui veulent venir dans des pays tels que, enfin, les territoires de la communauté, comme ils disent, l'Afrique du Nord, l'AOF, Madagascar, Antilles, Océanie. Alors voilà ce qu'ils disent. Vous êtes attirés par le charme de nos belles colonies et vous êtes en cela bien inspirés, car elles vous offrent, par leurs vastes possibilités, l'assurance d'une vie plus large et certainement plus agréable que dans la métropole. En effet, sous un climat bien souvent plus doux et assurément plus enchanteur, aux larges horizons, où toutes les activités vous sont offertes, vous pouvez vous tailler une vie heureuse et vous assurer un avenir que vous n'auriez probablement jamais pu espérer jusqu'ici. Alors, tu sais, ça me fait penser à Césaire, quand il a parlé de génocide par substitution, puisque nous, en revanche, on nous faisait partir.
So the first thing that they taught to their kids most of the time is to just forget about the Caribbean. You can't do nothing with black people. So when they had their kids, they would take them away, most of the time, away from the Caribbean education. So that's why, you know, when CASAF started to be on the zenith of Paris, we become, you know, some kind of federation. Yeah, where we would federate people, I can say that?
Yeah, put them together.
Put them together. They would recognize a culture, you know, because they would say, yes, you have Johnny Hallyday, who is a big star in France, you know, we have CASAF, you know, because before they were listening to Beatles, they were listening to, and they couldn't tell them who they had in the Caribbean, who was the best, you know, so they had to love Johnny Hallyday, they had to love the Beatles, they had to love the people of Europe, because they didn't know a clue about, you know, the music in the Caribbean, and mostly the music of Caribbean was, you know, swing, yeah, to dance and everything, but you didn't have like big stars coming out, you know, and then after Bob Marley in Jamaica, we have CASAF in the French-speaking countries. You know, so they were proud of that, you know. So they got back to their country, their culture. But the thing is, because their parents never taught them Creole, even if they want to do Zouk, because many of them are doing Zouk, they do it in French, because they don't know the language. And the language seemed difficult to them, and, you know, some of them saying, yeah, well, that's the old, that our speak is singing in Creole, now we have to sing in French because we had to. And, you know, but it's nothing new. Before CASAF, you had some group, you know, saying the same thing. Before CASAF. And they were singing in French and they didn't go further, you know. And we came with the Creole and we opened door with the language, you know. So what you're saying, you know, you have to think a little and wonder and, you know about your history. And CASAF is part of history. So from the moment you know about that, maybe you can make an effort and try to learn Creole and everything. If you don't want, then go on with French. You know, that's it. Because maybe that's what they know. Because they don't know, you know, like what it is like eating crabs on Easter in the Caribbean next to the seaside. You see, they never had that, you know, in their life. So they don't know what it is like. That's all.
Well, that's a big debate because our traditional music is in Creole. Then you had Zouk that came, and with CASAF, the songs were in Creole. And CASAF had a successful international career. And now, like in the 90s, I think, 90s, 2000, a lot of Zouk songs started to be in French. And they said that they wanted to appeal to the French and get like more viewership or a broader, yeah. And I don't see it working. I think it's diluted well, I don't like it. And I feel I'm not interested. Whenever I hear Zouk in French, I don't like it. But in the dancehall, I think they still speak Creole. Yes, no? In dancehall a little bit more. They don't. I'm not sure. I'm old, so I'm not listening to young people music anymore. But not that much, not that much. But I do hear it in Zouk. Zouk is more and more in French, and to me that's regrettable because we speak Creole. Let's have it in Creole. And but I think think that the dancehall is still in Creole, but dancehall is still, it's in Creole, so it's more associated with violence, because most of our dancehall is more violence and women and stuff. So they still make the link between the language and the atmosphere. And when they want to talk about love and things like that, oh, they speak in French, no. And I find that ridiculous.
Well, I think because Kassav music went all over, it left the Caribbean space and they went to different parts of the world, in Africa and so forth, France and the United States, and I think Canada as well. So I think people have looked at Kassav as one of the most influential. But I think to me, they probably benefited from their predecessors, because if you didn't have Begin, if you didn't have Cadence Lipso, Compa, Cadence Wampa, you won't have Zouk. So, say one, say two. Yes, Kassav play a great part, because especially you have a Jocelyne Bewa, who actually, basically to me, she was very brave to sing French Creole all the time. Whereas Leona Gabriel, who was a beginning singer, when they had an interview with her a long time ago, and also there was Munda Rivel in Guadeloupe. Munda Rivel said, I think Munda Rivel was a little younger than Leona, and Munda Rivel said, for a woman singing French Creole in those days, it was considered to be vulgarity. And I think where Jocelyne Bewa really was, she was, I think to me, those two ladies, and maybe the other ladies there, but I mean, I've talked about them because I know more of them. They would have, in a way, led the path to Jocelyne Bewa, Tania Saint-Val, and all. So you always have people who would have led the path for others. So that's my view.